The courtroom was filled with the soft hum of whispers, the shuffling of papers, and the faint echo of footsteps against polished tiles. A small boy sat quietly on a wooden bench, his hands clasped tightly around a worn-out toy car. He didn't look up much. His eyes stayed low, staring at the floor as if he wished the ground could just swallow him whole. To anyone watching, he looked calm. But inside that little heart, everything was shaking. The voices of his parents had echoed in his head all morning. The shouting, the tears, the promises that never lasted more than a day. He didn't know what would happen next, only that something big was about to change. The boy's mother sat a few seats away, her face pale and tired. She kept wringing her hands together, her lips pressed tight, afraid that if she said another word, she'd break down completely. Across the room, the boy's father sat upright, trying to appear confident, though his foot tapped nervously against the floor. He had that same look he always wore when he didn't want to show fear, chin high, voice strong, but his eyes told a different story. The judge, an older man with kind but serious eyes, adjusted his glasses as he looked over the case file. The room went quiet. It was a small-town court, nothing fancy, but today it felt heavier than usual. Everyone could feel the tension hanging in the air. The lawyers were done arguing. They had each spent hours painting their client as the better parent. The mother's lawyer talked about stability, safety, and a nurturing home. The father's lawyer spoke about opportunity, structure, and the importance of a strong male figure. Words like responsibility and custody rights filled the air, but none of it made sense to the boy. He just wanted them to stop fighting. He glanced up once, just for a moment, catching sight of both parents, and for the first time, he realized something. They weren't looking at him. Not once had they looked at him during this whole battle. They were looking at the judge, the lawyers, the papers, at everything else but him. His small fingers gripped the toy car tighter. The paint had chipped away from the metal edges, and one of the wheels barely turned anymore. It was a toy his father had given him when he was 5, back when they used to go to the park on weekends. He still remembered those afternoons in the ice cream truck, the laughter, the way his father would lift him onto his shoulders and run through the grass. That felt like another life now. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice deep and calm. "I've reviewed both sides carefully," he said. "Before I make any decision, I want to ask something." His eyes shifted toward the boy. "Would you like to say anything, son?" The room went still. Even the sound of the air conditioner seemed to fade. The boy froze. He hadn't expected to be asked. His mother's eyes widened and his father leaned forward slightly, nervous about what he might say. The lawyers exchanged quick glances. No one had prepared him for this. He looked down again, unsure. His lips parted, but no words came out. He wanted to speak, but every time he thought of what to say, his chest tightened. He wasn't used to anyone asking what he wanted. The judge smiled softly. "You don't have to if you don't want to," he said gently. "I just thought it was fair to hear your voice, too." The boy gave a small nod and whispered, "No, sir." The judge nodded back, respecting his silence. "That's all right," he said kindly. "Thank you." The rest of the room relaxed a little. The lawyers resumed their arguments, voices rising again as if nothing had happened. But the boy barely heard them. His mind had wandered somewhere else. Back to the morning his parents had told him they were getting divorced. He remembered sitting at the kitchen table, his cereal going soggy while his parents stood near the sink avoiding each other's eyes. His mother had said, "It's for the best." His father had said, "We'll figure it out." But he had known even then that something was broken for good. After that day, everything changed. His mother moved into a small apartment across town. His father stayed in the house but stopped coming home on time. They each said they loved him, but their love came with too many instructions. His mother said, "Don't tell your father about this." His father said, "Your mother doesn't understand." He was trapped in between, like a rope being pulled from both ends. In the courtroom, those same words echoed inside his head, growing louder until his toy car slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a soft clink. The sound made everyone turn for a second. He bent down quickly to pick it up, cheeks burning with embarrassment. The judge glanced at him again. There was something about that boy's stillness that struck him, the way he seemed to carry more weight than his small shoulders should hold. When the lawyers finished, the judge leaned back in his chair and sighed. "This is not an easy case," he said. Both of you clearly love your son. But love isn't just words. It's what you do with them. The mother blinked away tears. The father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. I'll take a short recess before announcing my decision, the judge said finally. He stood up and everyone followed suit as he left the room. As soon as the judge was gone, the silence broke. The parents began whispering angrily to their lawyers again. The boy just sat there staring at his toy. A woman from the child services department leaned over and tried to comfort him, asking softly if he was okay. He nodded without looking up. When the courtroom cleared for a few minutes, he stayed seated, his feet barely touching the floor. Through the window, he could see a faint bit of sunlight sneaking through the clouds. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes and imagined being outside, running, laughing, feeling free again. He missed how things used to be before everything fell apart. Back then, mornings smelled like pancakes and his mother's perfume. His father would whistle while making coffee. They would tease each other about who burned the toast. The boy would laugh so hard that milk came out of his nose. Now everything felt like a memory he was too young to lose. When the judge returned, everyone took their places again. The air felt heavier than before, as if everyone could sense that the next few words would decide everything. The judge began. After reviewing the testimonies and evidence, I am ready to share my decision. The boy's stomach tightened. His mother clasped her hands. His father leaned forward, waiting. The lawyers looked confident, but underneath, even they seemed nervous, the judge continued. His voice steady, but before he could finish the sentence, something unexpected happened. The boy's heart started pounding, and his hand went up slightly, almost on its own. Then he froze halfway, realizing what he had done. Everyone turned toward him again. The judge paused mid-sentence and looked directly at him. Yes? The judge asked gently. The boy's mouth went dry. He didn't know what made him do that. It was like something deep inside him refused to stay silent anymore. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered, "It's okay. You don't need to speak now." But the boy couldn't stop the thought that had been building inside his chest for days, weeks, maybe even years. He looked at his parents. His mother was crying softly. His father looked nervous, his lips tightening as if trying to hold back 1,000 words. The judge asked again, "Do you want to say something, son?" The boy hesitated. For a moment, he wanted to sit back down, pretend nothing had happened. But something about the way everyone was waiting, the silence, the eyes, the moment, pushed him forward. He swallowed hard, gripping the little car so tight that the metal pressed into his palm. "Can I say just one thing?" he asked quietly. The judge nodded. "Of course. Take your time." The courtroom was silent again. Even the guards by the door stopped moving. The boy could hear his own heartbeat. He took a deep breath and tried to form the words, but they stuck in his throat. He wasn't sure how to begin, or if he even should. Before he could continue, the judge said kindly, "It's all right, son. You don't have to be afraid here. Just tell us what's in your heart." The boy's lips trembled slightly. He looked up for the first time that day, his eyes shining with tears that he tried hard not to let fall. Everyone watched, waiting for him to speak, but then he stopped. He couldn't say it yet. Not now. Not while everyone was still arguing in their minds. So he sat back down quietly, shaking his head. "I'll wait," he whispered. The judge nodded slowly, understanding that whatever the boy had to say, it wasn't ready to come out, not yet. As the courtroom settled again, no one realized that this quiet moment, this pause, was only the calm before something much bigger. Because soon, when the judge finally gave him another chance to speak, the boy would stand, face the court, and say just 3 words that would silence everyone and change everything that day. The night before the court hearing had been quiet, but not peaceful. The boy lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling while the dim streetlight outside cast soft yellow lines through the window blinds. The house felt emptier than usual. Boxes were stacked in the corner of his room, filled with books, clothes, and small toys he hadn't touched in months. He didn't know whether he'd unpack them again in this house or somewhere else. He heard footsteps down the hall. His mother was pacing again. She always did that when she was nervous. Her voice came through the thin wall, low and trembling as she spoke on the phone. He couldn't make out the words, but he didn't have to. He knew it was about the court. Everything lately was about the court. He pulled the blanket up to his chin and tried to think of something happy. The beach trip last summer, the sandcastle they built, the ice cream that melted too fast. But those memories felt blurry now. They didn't belong to the same family anymore. They belonged to a time before the shouting started, before the long silences, before his parents stopped smiling at each other. The next morning, his mother looked tired. She barely ate breakfast. Her hands shook as she tied her scarf. "We have to leave soon," she said softly. He nodded without saying a word. He was used to her voice sounding careful, as if every sentence might break if she spoke too loud. She tried to smile at him, but her eyes gave her away. "It'll be okay," she whispered, though she didn't seem to believe it herself. They drove in silence most of the way to the courthouse. The air felt heavy inside the car. Every few minutes she glanced at him through the rearview mirror, maybe hoping to find some reassurance in his small, calm face. But he just looked out the window, watching trees and buildings pass by. He didn't want to think about what was coming. When they arrived, his father was already there. He was standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, talking to his lawyer. The boy froze when he saw him. For a moment, he didn't know whether to run toward him or stay behind his mother. His father turned and smiled faintly, and not the wide, easy smile he used to have, but a forced one. "Hey, buddy," his father said softly, bending slightly to meet his eyes. "Hi," the boy whispered. It was awkward. They hadn't seen each other in 2 weeks, and those weeks had felt longer than ever. His father reached out as if to ruffle his hair, but hesitated halfway and dropped his hand. The moment passed. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled like polished wood and paper. People moved quietly through the halls, some holding files, others whispering about their own cases. The boy kept close to his mother as they entered the courtroom, but he couldn't stop glancing back at his father. That morning wasn't the first time he'd been in court. The first hearing had been months ago, but he didn't remember much, only that everyone spoke about him as if he wasn't there. They called him the child. They said things like, "The child needs stability and the child should have routine." He wanted to tell them he had a name, that he could speak for himself, but no one asked him to. At home, things hadn't been much better. After his father moved out, the house felt different. His mother tried to make things normal. She cooked his favorite meals and helped him with homework, but she often looked distracted. At night, she'd sit by the window staring at her phone, waiting for a call that never came. When his father visited, things were strange too. He brought gifts, new sneakers, video games, a shiny bicycle, but they didn't feel the same. The boy didn't want gifts. He wanted both of them together again, laughing in the same room. But every visit ended with tense goodbyes and promises that didn't mean much anymore. Once he asked his father, "Why can't you come home?" His father sighed and said, "It's complicated." The boy frowned. "But I don't understand." His father smiled sadly. "You will one day." That day never came. The months dragged on. There were meetings with counselors, phone calls, more court dates. Sometimes adults talked around him, about his school, his behavior, his emotional adjustment. He heard his name mentioned like a problem that needed fixing. But no one asked what it felt like to be caught in the middle of two people who once promised to love each other forever. He remembered one night when the shouting got really bad. His parents thought he was asleep, but he heard every word. His mother's voice cracked as she yelled, "You never cared enough!" His father's voice thundered back, "You pushed me away." The sound of something breaking followed. Maybe a glass, maybe just the last piece of peace they had left. He pulled the blanket over his head and tried not to cry. He had wanted to run into the room to tell them to stop, but he was too scared. The noise made his chest hurt. When it finally went quiet, he peeked through the crack of his door and saw his mother sitting on the floor, her face buried in her hands. That image never left him. In the weeks that followed, he tried to be the peacemaker. He'd tell his mother, "Dad said he misses you," and tell his father, "Mom said she hopes you're okay." But those words never fixed anything. They only made both of them look sadder. At school, his teacher noticed he was quieter than usual. He used to love talking about dinosaurs and space, but now he mostly kept to himself. He'd sit in the back of the class drawing small families in his notebook, always 3 stick figures holding hands. Sometimes he'd draw a 4th figure standing apart watching them. He never showed those drawings to anyone. As the custody battle dragged on, the boy began to understand things no child should have to. He knew when his parents were lying, when they were pretending for his sake. He learned how to smile when he wanted to cry, how to say "I'm fine" even when he wasn't. One evening, after another long argument over the phone, his mother sat beside him on the couch and said, "Sweetheart, you know we both love you, right?" He nodded. "But we can't live together anymore," she said softly. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and they can't fix them." He stared at her, then whispered, "Why not try harder?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Instead, she hugged him tightly, and he could feel her heart racing. Now, sitting in that courtroom months later, all those memories came rushing back. Every argument, every broken promise, every lonely night. It was too much for someone so young to hold. But he carried it all quietly, never complaining. He watched his parents on opposite sides of the room. They didn't look angry today, just tired. He wondered if they were tired of fighting too. He hoped they were. The judge returned from recess, and everyone stood again. The boy felt his heartbeat in his ears. He didn't want to hear what came next, but he couldn't stop listening either. The judge began to speak slowly, his voice deep and thoughtful. He talked about parental responsibility, emotional well-being, financial support, all the things adults cared about. But the boy's thoughts drifted elsewhere. He remembered the time his father took him fishing. They didn't catch anything that day, but it didn't matter. They sat by the lake eating sandwiches, watching the ripples in the water. His father had said, "You don't need to catch something to enjoy the moment." He remembered the night his mother stayed up late helping him build a school project. They'd made a cardboard volcano together, and when it finally worked, red foam spilled out everywhere. They laughed so hard they forgot to clean the kitchen. Those were the moments that felt real. Not the fights. Not the tears. Just small, quiet memories that made him feel safe. He wanted that feeling again, even if it meant forgiving them both. The judge's voice brought him back to the present. "This case," he said, "is about a child's future. And before we go further, I'd like to hear from the child himself if he wishes to speak." This time the boy didn't hesitate as long. He looked around the room. His heart was pounding again, but something inside him had shifted. He didn't want to stay quiet anymore. His lawyer leaned over and whispered, "You don't have to say anything, okay?" But the boy shook his head slightly. He wanted to. Not because anyone told him to, but because he needed to. He stood up slowly, his small frame trembling but his eyes steady. The judge gave him a kind nod. The boy took a deep breath and said softly, "I just want to say something." The judge replied, "Go ahead, son. You can speak freely here." Everyone turned to him. His parents' eyes locked on him for the first time that day. The boy looked from one to the other, then down at his toy car resting on the table. He could still feel the dents in its surface, the scratches that came from all the times he dropped it during fights at home. That toy had survived it all, just like he had. He looked up again, tears welling up, but his voice surprisingly steady. He opened his mouth, and before anyone could stop him, he began to speak. His words were simple, short, and unexpected. They weren't angry. They weren't confused. They were honest, the kind of truth only a child could say. And when he finished, the entire courtroom fell silent, frozen by what they had just heard. The boy stood there, small and trembling, yet somehow the most powerful person in the room. His voice was soft but clear, cutting through the silence like a whisper everyone could hear. The judge leaned slightly forward, giving him his full attention. The lawyers stopped shuffling papers. Even the guards by the door froze. "I just want to say something," the boy repeated, his eyes fixed on the judge. The judge nodded kindly. "Go ahead, son. We're all listening." The boy turned slowly to look at his parents. His mother's eyes were already filled with tears. His father's hands were clasped tightly together, resting on the table. For a moment, the boy didn't say anything. He just looked at them one after the other, as if trying to understand how two people who once loved each other so much could now sit on opposite sides of the room. He swallowed hard and said quietly, "I forgive you." 3 simple words, but they hit the room like thunder. For a second, no one moved. The mother's lips parted slightly, her breath catching. The father blinked, his expression breaking for the first time since the hearing began. Even the lawyers exchanged glances, unsure what to say or do. The judge took off his glasses slowly, setting them on the table as if to give himself a moment to take in what had just happened. The boy didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just stood there, calm and fragile, his hand still gripping the little toy car. "I forgive you," he said again, this time looking down. "Both of you." The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. The courtroom felt different now. The tension that had filled it for hours began to fade, replaced by something quieter: guilt, sorrow, maybe even love. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. His father looked away, blinking fast as if trying to fight the same thing. The boy didn't understand the weight those words carried for the adults in the room, but he knew what they meant for him. He was tired of choosing sides, tired of being the reason they fought. He just wanted peace. The judge spoke softly. "That was very brave of you," he said. "Would you like to tell us why you said that?" The boy hesitated. He looked down at his toy car and turned one of its wheels with his thumb, watching it wobble. "Because," he said slowly, "I don't want to be angry anymore." He looked up again, his small voice steady despite the tremor. "I hear them fight all the time. They say things about each other that hurt. Sometimes they say it when I'm in the room. Sometimes they think I can't hear, but I do. And it hurts me too." The mother buried her face in her hands. The father stared at the table, motionless. "I used to think it was my fault," the boy went on. "Like maybe if I was better or quieter or did everything right, they'd stop fighting. But it didn't work. They just kept fighting, and I got scared all the time. Not because they hit me or anything, just because I didn't know what would happen next. One day we were happy, and the next day everything broke again." His words came slowly, one by one, like pieces of a truth that had been waiting too long to come out. "I just want them to stop hurting each other," he said softly. "I want them to be okay. I don't want to pick one. I love both of them. But I forgive them. Because if I don't, I'll keep feeling sad forever." The judge leaned back, his face thoughtful. No one in the room said a word. Even the air felt still. After a moment, the judge spoke again, his voice gentle. "You're a very wise young man," he said. "You've said something today that many adults never find the courage to say." The boy looked up, unsure what to reply. He didn't feel wise. He just felt tired. The kind of tired that came from holding too much inside for too long. His mother stood up slowly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice breaking. May I say something to him?" The judge nodded. She turned toward her son, tears streaming freely down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you ever felt like this was your fault." It never was. Not for 1 second. She took a step closer but stopped halfway, afraid to get too near. "I was angry and I took it out on the wrong things. On your father. On the world. Sometimes even on you when I shouldn't have. But I love you. I always have." The boy looked at her quietly. His father stood too, his face pale, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "And I'm sorry too," he said, struggling with the words. "I wasn't there the way I should have been. I thought I was doing what was right by walking away when things got bad. But maybe I just made it worse. You don't deserve that. You deserve parents who act like adults." The boy blinked fast, fighting tears he didn't want to show. "I just want us to stop fighting," he said again. His father nodded, lowering his head. "We will, I promise." The judge watched the scene quietly, giving them space. He'd seen hundreds of families come through his courtroom, but this one felt different. There was something raw, real, and pure in that child's honesty. After a long silence, the judge said, "This is what I hoped would happen." Not the forgiveness, no one could have expected that, but understanding. Sometimes the law can't fix what people break, only they can. What this young man has shown today is something we all need to remember. He paused, glancing at both parents. "Your son doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to stop hurting each other. If you can do that, maybe he'll finally get the childhood he deserves." The mother nodded weakly. The father sat back down, wiping his face with his hand. The lawyers were silent, their arguments now meaningless. The entire case had shifted in a way no one could have planned. The boy sat down again, clutching his toy car. His hands were trembling, but he felt lighter, like a weight he'd carried for years had suddenly fallen away. For the first time, he could breathe without fear. The judge decided to pause the hearing for the rest of the day. "We'll reconvene later," he said gently. "But for now, I think we all need a moment." When they left the courtroom, the boy walked between his parents. The hallway was long and bright, sunlight spilling through tall windows. No one spoke for a while. Then his mother reached out, gently taking his hand. A second later, his father did the same. They walked together in silence, 3 people, one small step toward healing. Outside, the world felt bigger and warmer. The boy looked up at the sky, the clouds drifting lazily. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel trapped between 2 sides. He just felt like a boy again. They sat on a bench outside the courthouse. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and rain. His father looked at him and said softly, "You know, you taught us something today." The boy tilted his head. "What do you mean?" His father smiled faintly. "You reminded us that sometimes the hardest thing isn't saying sorry. It's forgiving. You did both of us a kindness we didn't deserve." His mother nodded beside him. "We forgot what really mattered." "You reminded us," the boy shrugged. "I just didn't want us to keep being sad." His mother brushed his hair gently. "You have a big heart," she whispered. He smiled a little. Maybe it's because it's been broken so many times. That made her cry again, quietly. But this time it wasn't out of pain. It was from realizing how much she had to make up for. His father looked away toward the parking lot, his eyes red but softer than before. As they sat there, a cool breeze passed through, and the boy let out a small sigh of relief. He didn't know what would happen next, who he'd live with, how often he'd see each of them. But for once, he didn't feel scared of the future. He had said what needed to be said. The rest was up to them. The judge, standing at his window inside, watched them quietly. He had seen countless families torn apart, but few had found their way back to this kind of moment. He whispered softly to himself, 3 words, and the truth finally comes out. That night, back at home, the boy sat on his bed, his toy car resting beside him. The house was quiet again, but it felt different now, calmer. His mother was in the kitchen talking softly on the phone, and he could tell from her voice that she wasn't angry this time. She sounded tired but peaceful. He looked at the toy car, turning it over in his hands. One of its wheels finally came off, rolling across the blanket. He picked it up and smiled. It didn't matter that it was broken. He'd keep it anyway. It reminded him that even broken things can still be loved. He lay down and stared at the ceiling. The moonlight spilled through the window, soft and silver. For the first time in months, he closed his eyes and didn't feel afraid. He knew tomorrow wouldn't fix everything. His parents still had to figure things out. But something inside him told him it would be okay. Because sometimes, 3 small words can do what years of arguments can't. They can heal. They can open hearts. And in that courtroom, on that day, a little boy taught everyone, even the adults who thought they knew better, and what forgiveness really means. The silence that followed his words felt heavier than anything anyone in that courtroom had ever experienced. The boy's voice still echoed faintly in everyone's minds. 3 small words, so soft and innocent, yet strong enough to shake every heart in that room. The judge looked at him, eyes slightly wider than before, trying to process what he had just heard. His parents sat frozen, both with tears starting to well up, unsure how to react. "I forgive you." That was all he said. 3 words that no one expected. 3 words that cut deeper than anger, deeper than blame. For a moment, it didn't even feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like time had stopped. Like every person sitting there was being quietly reminded of something they had forgotten long ago. The boy didn't sit down right away. His small hands trembled as he looked at both his parents. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just spoke from somewhere deep inside him, a place that had been holding too much for too long. "I forgive you both," he said again, this time looking at his father, then at his mother. "You don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to choose who's right or wrong. I just want us to stop hurting each other." The mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had always known her son was quiet, gentle, and sensitive, but she had no idea he carried this much understanding in his heart. His father turned his head down, staring at the floor, his jaw tight, eyes red. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words came out. The judge leaned back slowly, resting his hand on his chin. Even he looked moved. Years of hearing shouting, accusations, and bitterness in family cases, but never something like this. It was as if the boy had broken through all the noise and reached the very truth no one else could say. The boy took a deep breath, his voice still soft but steady. "I know you both love me," he said. "I know you didn't mean to make things so hard. But when you fight, it hurts me more than it hurts either of you. I don't want to pick sides. I just want peace. Every person in that room could feel his pain and sincerity. The court clerk looked down, pretending to shuffle papers just to hide the emotion in her eyes. One of the lawyers quietly took off his glasses and wiped them, pretending it was dust. But everyone knew it wasn't. Even the security guard standing near the back lowered his head slightly, touched by what he heard. The judge finally cleared his throat. "Son," he said softly, "those are very powerful words. You've shown more courage and wisdom today than most adults I've seen in this courtroom." The boy nodded quietly. "I just don't want anyone to hate each other anymore," he whispered. The judge turned to the parents. His tone changed. It wasn't strict or legal anymore. It was deeply human. "You both heard what your child just said," he began slowly. "You've been arguing for months about who deserves custody, who did what, and who's to blame. But right here, right now, your son just reminded us all what this case is really about. Love, not winning." The mother couldn't hold back her sobs. She looked at the father with trembling eyes. "I didn't know he felt this deeply," she said softly. "I thought keeping him away from all this would protect him." The father shook his head slightly. "And I thought fighting for him was the right thing," he said. "But maybe I was just fighting to prove something." The judge nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time both of you stop fighting for him and start fighting with him, to give him peace." The air in the courtroom began to shift. The sharp, heavy tension that had filled the space earlier started to melt away, replaced by something fragile yet real, a sense of reflection. The boy finally sat down, his little shoulders slumping with relief, as if a heavy burden had just been lifted off him. For months he had watched his parents battle each other, believing he had to stay quiet. But today, in just a few words, he had done something neither adult could. He brought truth into the room. The judge asked for a short break. As everyone stood and the court officers opened the doors, people walked out quietly, still shaken by what they had heard. No one spoke loudly. Even whispers carried a tone of respect. His mother walked over to where he sat, kneeling in front of him. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes swollen from crying. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. "I never wanted you to feel like this. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." He looked at her, his small eyes still full of warmth. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "I just want us to be happy again." His father came closer, standing awkwardly for a second, unsure how to join in. Then he slowly reached out his hand and placed it on his son's shoulder. "You're braver than I ever was," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, too. I shouldn't have let things get this far." For a few moments, the three of them stayed like that. No shouting, no anger, just silence and the sound of slow, heavy breathing. When the judge returned, he looked different too, a calmer, more thoughtful. "I think this case has shown all of us something important," he said gently. "It's not always the adults who have the answers. Sometimes it takes a child to remind us what really matters." He didn't give a final ruling that day. Instead, he told both parents to attend counseling sessions, not just for custody arrangements, but to heal as a family. "You both need to learn how to listen to each other again," he said. "Not as ex-partners, but as parents who share one heart, and your sons." Both parents nodded, their expressions softer now, humbled by the weight of what they had just heard. As the hearing ended, the boy held his mother's hand in one and his father's in the other. They walked out of the courtroom together. For the first time in a long while, there was no tension pulling them apart. They didn't say much, but they didn't need to. Sometimes the quiet speaks louder than words. Outside, the sun was still shining. It was one of those gentle afternoons when everything feels a bit calmer than usual. The boy looked up at the sky, squinting at the light, and smiled faintly. He didn't know what the future would look like, but he knew it could finally start to get better. Over the next few days, something changed at home. The father began showing up on time for visits. The mother stopped using harsh words whenever his name was mentioned. They still disagreed, but the tone was softer. Instead of shouting, they talked. Instead of blaming, they listened. The boy could feel the difference. He started sleeping better, smiling more. His drawings changed too. Instead of sketching broken homes and sad faces, he began drawing pictures of 3 people standing together under one sun. Not perfect, but together. His teacher noticed the change. "You seem happier these days," she told him. He nodded shyly. "My parents are trying," he said. "They're not fighting as much." It wasn't easy for his parents. Old habits didn't disappear overnight. There were still moments of tension, but whenever things started to get heated, they both remembered those 3 words, the ones that came from their son's small but fearless voice. I forgive you. Those words became like a bridge between them, something they could always come back to. Months later, they were back in court for a follow-up hearing. This time, there were no raised voices, no accusations. They both spoke calmly about how things were improving. The judge smiled, clearly proud. He looked at the boy again. You've done more for this family than you realize, he said warmly. Those words you spoke that day, and they changed everything. The boy smiled, shyly looking down. I just said what I felt, he replied. The judge nodded. And that's exactly why it mattered. As they left the courthouse that day, the mother looked at the father. Maybe we can actually do this, she said quietly. He nodded. For him, we have to. The boy walked between them again, holding their hands, the same way he did that first day. Only this time it didn't feel forced. It felt real. The world outside was still noisy and busy, but inside that little family, something had changed forever. The boy had spoken not just to stop a fight, but to start healing. And in doing so, he reminded everyone, even strangers in that courtroom, that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's courage. And sometimes it takes the smallest voice to speak the biggest truth. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day in the courtroom. The memory of those 3 words, I forgive you, still lingered in everyone's hearts like a quiet echo that refused to fade. What had started as a painful legal battle had now turned into something else entirely, a slow, fragile journey toward healing. The boy's parents had begun counseling, just as the judge advised. At first it felt awkward. Sitting across from each other in that small office with soft music playing in the background and a counselor gently asking questions wasn't easy. They had spent so long blaming each other that it almost felt unnatural to talk calmly. But something inside both of them had changed. Those words their son spoke had stripped away their defenses. There was no more pretending to be right, no more rehearsed stories about who hurt who more. There was just honesty, raw, uncomfortable, but real. The father spoke first during one session. I was angry, he admitted, not just at her, but at myself. I failed to keep us together and I didn't know how to fix it, so I turned that anger into fighting. The mother listened quietly, tears in her eyes. I know, she whispered. I wasn't perfect either. I said things I didn't mean. I pushed you away when you tried to talk. The counselor nodded gently. What matters is that you both understand that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It allows you to move forward. And that's what they tried to do. Slowly, step by step. At home, the boy could sense the difference. His parents still lived separately, but they no longer treated each other like enemies. They started talking on the phone, sometimes just to share updates about school or his health, but other times just to ask, "How are you doing?" The boy noticed those small changes more than anything else. The quiet phone calls, the soft tone of their voices, the way they didn't slam doors anymore. These tiny things meant everything to him. He began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. One weekend, both parents agreed to spend the afternoon together with him at the park. It had been years since they had done something as a family. They brought sandwiches, a frisbee, and a blanket to sit on. The boy couldn't stop smiling as he ran between them, tossing the frisbee back and forth. At one point, he tripped and fell on the grass. Both parents rushed to help him up at the same time, their hands brushing against each other. They looked at each other and laughed softly, a small shared laugh that carried more warmth than words ever could. The boy looked up and grinned. See? We can still have fun together. They both smiled, realizing how true that was. That night, when the boy went to bed, he whispered a small prayer of thanks. He didn't ask for anything, he just said thank you. Thank you for peace. Thank you for love. Thank you for a second chance. Meanwhile, the judge who had handled their case couldn't forget that day either. In all his years on the bench, he had seen hundreds of families torn apart, but rarely one brought back together by the innocence of a child. One evening, he sat at his desk writing notes for his next cases, and he paused. He looked at a photo of his own family and smiled softly. The boy's words had reminded him, too, that behind every case number and legal term there were hearts trying to heal. Months passed, and the boy's life slowly returned to normal. School became more enjoyable.
He made new friends, joined a small soccer club, and even started doing better in his classes.
His teachers noticed his brighter spirit. "You've been smiling a lot lately," one of them said. He just shrugged and replied, "Things are better at home now." His parents continued therapy and found ways to cooperate without bitterness. They didn't get back together, but they learned something even more important: how to respect each other again. When one couldn't pick the boy up from school, the other would gladly do it without complaining. When birthdays or holidays came around, they celebrated together, not as a couple, but as parents who shared love for the same child. The boy's favorite memory from that year was his birthday. For the first time since the separation, both his parents were in the same room, smiling and laughing. They even baked a cake together. It wasn't perfect, a bit lopsided and uneven, but it was theirs. After everyone left, he sat between them, still holding his half-eaten piece of cake. "You know," he said softly, "this is the best birthday ever." His mother smiled. "Why is that?" He shrugged. "Because we're all here. Together." That night, when they tucked him into bed, both parents felt something shift inside them again. The realization that maybe forgiveness wasn't just about their son's words. It was about how those words had changed them. Later that week, the judge called for a final review of their case. It wasn't a tense hearing like before, but more like a check-in. The family entered the same courtroom where everything had fallen apart months ago. But this time, the air felt lighter. The judge smiled when he saw them. "Well," he said kindly, "I can already tell this is a different room than last time." The boy smiled shyly. "We're trying," he said. "I can see that," the judge replied. "And how have things been at home?" The parents exchanged a glance before the mother spoke. "Better," she said. "We've both learned a lot. We don't argue anymore, and we talk about what's best for him together." The father nodded. "It's not perfect," he added. "But we're building something new, one day at a time." The judge looked at the boy and said softly, "You know, you started all this. Those 3 words you said that day, they did more good than any court order could have done." The boy smiled and looked down at his hands, a little embarrassed. "I just said what I felt," he murmured. "And that," the judge said with a warm smile, "is what makes you wise beyond your years." The hearing ended quickly. There were no arguments, no bitterness, just a sense of closure. Before leaving, the judge leaned forward and said, "You 3 have something very rare, a second chance. Don't waste it." Outside the courthouse, the family took a picture together, a quiet reminder of how far they had come. The boy stood in the middle, smiling brightly, holding both his parents' hands. As they walked down the steps, the boy looked up at them. "Do you think we'll always stay like this?" he asked. His father smiled. "We'll always be a family," he said. "It might look a little different, but we'll always have each other." His mother nodded. "And no matter what happens, we'll never stop loving you." He squeezed their hands and grinned. "That's all I ever wanted." From that day on, life wasn't suddenly perfect, but it was real. There were still moments of frustration, still misunderstandings, but there was also patience and kindness. Every time things started to feel hard again, one of them would remember the moment in that courtroom, the trembling little boy standing before the judge, saying those 3 simple words. And just like that, they would calm down. Over time, the boy grew older, and his memories of the courtroom faded, but not the lesson behind it. He learned that words have power, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. He carried that lesson with him everywhere, at school, with friends, even as he grew into an adult. Years later, when he stood on a stage at his high school graduation, he looked out into the crowd and saw his parents sitting together, clapping proudly. They weren't perfect, but they were there. And that meant everything. As he gave his speech, he looked right at them and said, "I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing peace over pain, and I'm thankful my family taught me that." Tears filled their eyes as they watched their son speak, the same boy who once stood in a courtroom and taught them both how to heal. When the ceremony ended, they hugged him tightly. "You made us proud," his father whispered. "You made us better," his mother added, and he smiled, knowing that those 3 words he once said as a scared little boy had changed everything. The story of that day in the courtroom spread quietly. Some people who had been there never forgot it. Lawyers told the story to remind other families that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Judges shared it with colleagues as a reminder that real justice isn't always written in laws. Sometimes it's spoken through the heart of a child, and somewhere deep inside, the boy, now a young man, had always carried that memory like a light. Not a sad one, but a gentle one. A reminder that no matter how broken things seem, forgiveness can still bring them back together. Because sometimes 3 simple words can stop a courtroom, and sometimes those same words can heal a family forever.